Great, then I'm sharing a very warm welcome to today's challenge webinar with the city of Essen. I'm Rebecca Wessinghag and I work for the ICLEI World Secretariat, and I will be your moderator of the day, also joined by my colleague Ingshi Deng Sommer. This webinar is number 3 of this year's Urban Transitions Alliance Challenge cycle. And we have these annual cycles where 4 to 5 cities receive support for their current priorities related to climate action and social equity. Today's peer webinar is dedicated to support Essen's challenge of leveraging climate action through cross-sectoral financing, as you see in the opening slide. A very warm welcome to all our speakers and participants. Before we dive into today's topic, please let me share a few housekeeping rules. First of all, the webinar is recorded, so it would be great if you keep yourself muted during the presentations to prevent any background noise. A big part of the session is dedicated to question and discussion, so we hope that you all bring in your contributions and please go ahead and ask the speakers if you have a question or something is not clear, or if you have a contribution. During the conversations, please feel free to just unmute yourself and share your questions freely. But you could always, even during the presentations, raise your hand or submit your questions through the chat. And since we have a very full agenda today, I will have to do a little bit of timekeeping, so you're aware. We're really delighted to have a number of exciting contributions to ensure that we also have some room for discussion afterwards. And please bear with me if I cut you short in the end, if we're a little bit over time. So the topic of this peer learning session is cross-sectoral financing. We will look into innovative ways to unlock financing for local climate initiatives. What are financial synergies among different sectors, such as insurance and health, and others, of course, to effectively unlock financing opportunities that generate social and ecological benefits. What that exactly means, and we will hear from our first speaker in a moment, but before we dive into the discussion, let me introduce today's speakers who will frame the conversation and will inspire us with their successful approaches. So we will start the session with an introduction on today's challenge topic from the city of Essen. So Sebastian Schlecht from the city will introduce the challenge and also give us a little bit on background and existing conversations that have already happened for this challenge. And we will have 3 case interventions. First, we will hear about the LEDS Lab, a laboratory for bankable climate projects from Amel Shibaka from our ICLEI South America office. Then we will hear about the piloting measures to make streets easier and safer for local residents from Lucy Saunders, the director of the Healthy Streets program, the Healthy Streets organization, I'm sorry. And then we will hear an intervention on crowdsourcing solutions for financing long-term community projects from my colleague Purya from the ICLEI World Secretariat, who is Senior Research Officer in our organization. These interventions will be quite short, as I said, since we will hope to have enough time for some broader conversations and discussion in the end. There will always be, right after the intervention presentations, a room for specific questions, more from the technical sort. That's really great. So let me just one more time welcome the participating city representatives from the different Transitions Alliance cities. I've seen Buffalo, I've seen Katowice, I've seen Essen, of course. So really great that you're all here. And also let me very warmly welcome a number of local stakeholders from the city of Essen who are new to this webinar format. Among others, I warmly welcome the University Hospital in Essen, the Essen branch of the German Weather Service, as well as Essen's Green Capital team and the Mercator Foundation. A very warm welcome also to the speakers of the day. And now, without further ado, I'm handing over to Sebastian Schlecht from the city of Essen, who will give us an introduction and the framing on today's topic. So Sebastian, this is over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rebecca, and hello to everybody. I'm Sebastian from Essen. Rebecca already introduced, and we are happy to share this challenge here with the UTA and all participants. As we are a bit short in time, as Rebecca told me, I have to be straightforward with my presentation, so I try to share my screen right now.
That works perfectly, Sebastian.
Great. We're really happy to be here today and have all this input. So I will only have a short introduction in the idea of our challenge. And I'm very much looking forward to the other inputs from all over the world and discuss the outcomes of that. Our challenge is called Interlinking a Cross-Sectoral Sustainable Financing. We come from the idea that we have lots of impacts the last years we experienced in Essen, but also all over the world, like storm, like drought, fire events, heavy rainfalls, air pollution. So this, in the sum, these events made us thought that they all cause a lot of costs in so many different sectors, that society is has a huge effort to handle all these events. And how can we use this as a leverage for to take action in climate change, mitigation, adaptation, and resilient city and healthy environments? I just go through the sectors very short, and we just have some examples here, how we can define the costs and how we can also account them with numbers. Example, health and air pollution. There is a study, a European study that counts the average European city residents with 1,200 euro per year pollution costs on health effects. And if we count it down to the city of Essen, we have a huge amount of 877 million euro a year with the annual damage. We have risk. So we have the global risk report, and it was broken down by the climate risk index to Essen, which is impact in this insurance risk index of 25 million per year for the city of Essen. We have an environmental damage accounting, which is set up with an accounting system which differs from 195 to 680 euros per ton CO2. So if we sum this up to Essen, this is the outcomes of our actual research and scenario building of our climate action plan. It depends on the scenario, but this is between 4.1 and 27 billion euro of environmental damage costs through CO2 emission for the city of Essen. We have CO2 taxes. In Germany, they are already set up, and we will have, we set up a CO2 tax scenario, which you see here. It's starting 2020 and going up to 2050. And so how much CO2 tax can we save up to 2040 when we run different scenarios? And this is counted here in 1.9 billion if we have the 2030 scenario, and 1.4 to the 2040 scenario. Even the last years, there was a discussion on the ratio of investment and prevention of costs and risks and damage. And the Lifeline report of the World Bank did report that the ratio is from 2 to 4 when we invest in resilient infrastructures, because we can prevent damage and we can prevent risks and impact on health and other things. So I did a small sum it up table here. So if we bring only this together, there is an amount of money available for, because we will spend this money anyway if we invest or if we pay the damage. So, and if we have the ratio idea, it may be cheaper. We invest money in the right time to prevent health risk, damage, and CO2 taxes. So the idea is that we can bring this different financial flows together with different stakeholders, that we have, because we have money flows from city administration, building infrastructure, we have private investments, we have private people who pay their health insurance and their doctors and their for their private life. We have a health sector which is with insurance systems and doctors and lots of money flowing there. We have place where people live in places which maybe will suffer in the quality of life by heat, climate change, air pollution. So there is a lot of money going around. How can we interlink? This is the question. We had a first meeting on that some weeks ago. And now I see that I forgot the Deutsche Wetterdienst in the logo graphic here. Sorry for that. Because I saw Guido Halbig also joining us here. So we have we've set up or tried to set up a local stakeholder meeting with people from insurances, from financial institutes, from the city administration, from health service institutions, and from research universities, from the Institute for Public Health and the Deutsche Wetterdienst. And the Mercator Foundation also joined the meeting. So we set up a meeting just to inform and to see how people are interested and to go bring things forward. So this is the second step in this challenge. Exchange here today on the international level. And I also shortly want to introduce you that we already have one idea in Essen which is coming up. It's a Trans-City project. If there is any specific question later, Kai Lips is also here. He is more in the detail, but the idea of Trans-City is an accounting system on the city level. And the tool of the European Union is an abstract tool on emission trading on the state level, on the federal level. And so this research project tries to bring this trading to the neighborhood level. And the Trans-City will connect two different neighborhoods in Essen, one in the north and one in the south. And the core is a cross-neighborhood participation and cooperation. Needs and ideas of residents are needed in the Trans-City and should be the source for the outcome of the trading. So the traded CO2 certificates should bring an impact on the neighborhood level. And the Trans-City should connect these neighborhoods with a different condition and also increase participation process in the climate protection, and quality of life in these neighborhoods. So this is very short wrap up of our challenge. We also hope to level up on the international exchange as we have here today. And what the outcome of the challenge may be, I have 3 small points: awareness raising and action by responsible stakeholders. So how can we involve different stakeholders on the city level and from different institutional and areas in this process? How can we develop manageable and accountable tools to leverage these money flows to really impact quality of life? And how can we use this in investing in resilient infrastructure and with that in livable and happy neighborhoods in our city? I hope this is understandable. Any questions are very welcome. And thank you for your attention. Looking forward for what comes up.
Great, thank you so much, Sebastian, for this very efficient presentation. You perfectly kept the time, and also I felt was really alerting in terms of the numbers you shared and the cost-benefit ratio. I think that was a really great introduction. So the question is not what we need or if we need to act, but the question is how. And I think specifically the different sectors that you shared or made us aware of with health and damage and risk relation. It's a really great that there was already a first meeting with insurance, health, finance, research and city representatives. So yeah, it's really cool that we also have some of the members of that meeting today. So maybe this can also be something where we can yeah, get to know a little bit more what was discussed or what are the concrete next actions that are planned. And I think it was really interesting to hear about the Trans City project, to already have a tangible idea of what kind of projects we could look like, or we could look at. In terms of the upcoming presentations, I think the common topic, and that really relates to also conversation that we had last week, is the stakeholder collaboration, like the question how to bring that about. And now with the next step, the financing question, like how can we not only bring together the different stakeholders, but how can we kind of bring together finance from different sides, and how can we make that relatable for actually tangible projects, and how can that look like? To now leave this level of abstract discussions, I think it will be really great to look at 3 examples that are a little bit concrete and show us what other cities and regions have already done. So thanks again, and I will now lead over to our first case intervention from the South America Secretariat on the LEDS Lab. So Amel, I welcome you again, and over to you. We are really excited to hear about the project.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, everyone. So I will be sharing my screen here so that you can see the presentation.
Perfect. We can see it great, perfectly now.
Okay, well, so as you already said in the beginning, so we are going to present an experience that we had here in South America that we called LEDS Lab, the Town Laboratory for Bankable Climate Projects. Actually, we developed this laboratory inside the project that was already ongoing here in South America and in other region. That is a global project from ICLEI, that is urban LEDS, that had the aim to help cities to reduce their emissions and work towards a more inclusive and green economy in the scope of their cities. So in this case of the LEDS Lab, we were trying to have a more pedagogical approach with local governments in the sense that here in South America, one of the issues that we faced was the capacity of the city's agent to build and design and present projects that were actually bankable and interesting and having climate change, like climate mitigation and adaptation in the core development of the project. So that was a very serious challenge for us here. We knew that we already had a demand. We knew that we already had cities that needed green finance for their projects, but we also didn't have enough persons or enough agents capacitated to build and create those projects, and making clear the needs and the relation between their projects and mitigation and adaptations. So the Let's Labs came as a solution to that, and we first starting with improving the capacity of local agents, knowing exactly what is the climate change compliancy, what do they need to build such projects, what are the steps, what are the important elements of the elaboration of a bankable project related to climate change, and that has mitigation and adaptation in its core. And then we also worked on them to understand their potential contribution about the indices, how the local governments can also help and help the national governments in that case to attain their indices, and how they can make it clear in the project that they are developing. Of course, that means also for us identifying and mapping and articulating with financial institutions and teaching and showing them about all the different types of financial mechanisms that are available to local governments that were not very known to some of them. So in that case, when we started the project last year, we decided that we would work on energy transition, renewable energy, and energy efficiency as a first case for the pilot project that we were going to implement. And we had like 4 steps. The first were the selections of the projects within the cities that already were participating in the urban-led project. So something that was very important for us was to show them that the selection of the project was already based on how properly they explain and they show the relation between their projects and the climate change issues that they were trying to tackle by developing those projects. So after the selections of the project, we went to a second step that was planning, of course, as we already knew that we were going to work with the energy sectors. We had to select and diagnose all the different buildings that we were going to work on, because we are already also selected that we will be working with solar PV, and also then we go to a pre-implementation phase of the project. That means technical analysis of the buildings and technical analysis of the project more in depth. And this step was more of having all the participants of the projects, not only from selected cities, but other cities, to understand what were like the difficulties that their project had on the technical level, and also how they could pre-structuring better the projects for finding some kind of funds. And also from that, we went to an implementation step of our project that was having workshops with all the different working groups, so that they understand all the process, and we have them also understand and participate to the procurement process and the project implementation itself. So we had selected 4 cities, 2 in Brazil, 2 in Colombia. We tried to select cities that were from very different regions and that had like very different profiles, so that we can show that the methodology was possible in very different environments and cases. And also something that was very important for us was the selection of the type of buildings that we wanted to implement the first pilot version of our projects. That means that you can see that we have 2 schools. So for us, we thought that this was going to be very important also to link climate education to the process of implementing the methodology of the Let's Labs, while we are capacitating local agents, and also at the same time showing to the students, very young students from the municipal schools, the process of transition of energy sources, and also have like local the local community participate in the process, because we know that at least here in Brazil, in the schools, local community are very active, and it was very important that we do have like very representative buildings in these first steps or first parts of the pilot version of the project. You can see that we also had an hospital in Recife that was very important for us, because it's a women's hospital, and that was a very good and important mark for the city of Recife. So by the end of this first phase of implementation of the pilot version, we also had the creation of educational centers that are kind of the legacy of the project for the the cities. And you can see here Belo Horizonte and Recife. In these educational centers, we are going to have not only young students, but the population in general going through the centers and understand and know and learn a little bit more about climate change, and also all the different possible integration between all the different sectors that are related to the thematics of climate change. So a little bit of the overview of what was actually the LEDS Labs in the term of the different activities and process that we had. As I already mentioned, we had workshops and that were technical for diagnosis and understanding actually the situation of each of those cities and the buildings that they had there, that they needed to have that energy sources changed. And then we had identification and quantification of mitigation measures, and then the selections and validations of mitigations measures. And then we started mapping potential funders, and also, as I said, in a more pedagogical process, help them prepare their projects and help them understand exactly what type of fundings are actually available. That is an information that most of the time local actors didn't have. They didn't know exactly beyond all the normal traditional financing line that they can access, that there are some that are totally reserved and exclusive to climate change opportunities and projects that link mitigation and adaptations. So another thing that is very important for us was the monitoring phase of the project. That is something that in local culture here, most of the time, we have actors implementing a project and then they just leave the project there. So it was very important for us that we do understand and we do create a methodology of monitoring the projects, the results of the projects, and also make them replicable in other parts of not only Brazil, Colombia, but also in other cities and countries around South America. So this is why we had other cities participating as observers in the process, and they were also able to join us during the capacity building sessions that we had with the cities that were selected to implement the pilot version of the project, meaning that we had to work a lot in bringing together technical components and financial components, and also ensure that the criteria of selections of the project were met regarding very high standards of international research captation process, so that we make sure that they're not only they're not only able to do that working with ICLEI, but even without ICLEI in the process, that the people we have already capacitated are able to build projects that are competitive on a more global level, and also can make sure that they understand that's important during the planning phase and also the investment phase of during the technical development of the project. So something that was very important for us during all the steps of the LEDS Lab methodology was the development of a local guide that we provided to the local government that has all step by step. You can see here all the different steps that we are describing in that guide that help them understand and help them go through the different steps to make sure that they are actually developing and elaborating bankable projects in the sense of in the thematics of climate change. So it was very important for us to have them going through all those different steps and to have them work not only with ICLEI, but also with some of our partner organizations, so that they understand exactly the preparation, the implementation, and then the operation, and then the post evaluation process of the project that they are going to implement. So some of the results that we had with this project was, of course, the improvement of local government capacity. That was actually our main objective. We had a local agent working with us since the first step, beginning of the implementation of the project. It was a very important learning process, not only for them, but also for ICLEI, because most of what we have learned together with the local government is now reflected in the guide. So we make it in a way that is more understanding for all of them. And of course, we have a mapping of financing sources for local governments in our region, the guide that already mentioned, and the educational centers. Here are some details about Recife and Belo Horizonte, that's where we can share with who is interested to see the numbers of the project. But to finish a little bit of the lesson that we learned, that I think that this is something that is interesting to share with all of you, is that we had to make clear to the local government that a consistent climate trajectory is essential for the project development. That means that they don't need to start worrying or working on climate change only where they are seeking from funds, but they need to have the very specific and robust strategy about climate change way before we start implementing this kind of projects or seeking for funds, and also understand that the political commitment is as important as the technical commitment and technical capacities, and understand the climate emergency has a cross-cutting issues, and also have an effective involvement of municipalities' employees so that they understand the projects from the beginning, and this makes the projects more sustainable, as most of the time you have political changes and you have like people moving from different secretariats to another, and then we need to generate ownership from the decision makers. This is also related to having the political commitment, and then strategic selections of the buildings, and of course make the pilot projects replicable so that they know, they understand, they learn about and during the process, and they are able to work with that in other buildings that they may choose to do the same process in the future. And also, the methodology can be adapted to every and other different sectors of climate change that the city is interested in working in. So thank you. I'm sorry if I went a little bit over my time, but this is a little bit what we had prepared to share with you. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you so much, Amel. That was a really great case to see how you have started to develop actually a methodology, and then also having this holistic approach with education and capacity building elements, and then also having the learnings to share with everybody behind. Before I open the floor to one or two questions, I have a question from my side already. Because you were saying that you were able to tap into different types of financing sources. Maybe you could share a little bit more details about those, like what type of actors were contributing or what type of resources you were able to make available for those projects. That would be great.
Yes, actually, this was a very interesting project. We actually built a pipeline where we had mapped local, national, regional, and global potential funders for the different projects that the cities were developing. In the specific case of the pilot versions, we had seed money from the projects because we wanted to make some kind of demo to show them that, okay, this is possible. So we built a process inside the project that was quite similar to the process that they would go through if they were seeking funds out of the project. But also in the case of Recife, during all the process of the preparations and having all the local actors, we actually could do a matchmaking with the energy company inside Recife that was interested in funding the project. So in the case of Recife, within the structure of the methodology of the project, we could make a match between the environmental secretariat and actually the energy company to fund the installations of the PV in the women's hospital in Recife.
Oh, that's really great to know. Thank you so much. Is there any other question to Amel at this point? Please feel free to just come in or raise your hand, however you would like.
I have a short question.
Yes, Sebastian, go ahead.
You just had the slide with where you said financiers mapping and seed money. So you gave seed money from your organization, or you organized financing already through partners. And I would be interested, how much or how successful have you been in getting financial support for the project from traditional funding, or also from private sectors or private money flows, which you could involve in your projects, like real estate sectors or other?
Yes, well, in the specific case, as I said, the seed money was already provided within the project. That means that we had a funder for the project, that is a UN Habitat, so we could help them with actually some of the money that we already had for the implementation of the urban-led as a project, as an umbrella project. But as I said, we had also had specific local partners that did some kind of donations. In the case, for example, of Belo Horizonte, we also have some others agency from the local government that already had parts of the materials that we needed to the implementation of the pilot version of the project, so they kind of invest in some kind of donations. And we did also a mapping of local banks, and especially development banks, and that are now very, very active here in Brazil and also in Colombia. They are starting to work a little bit together. So we didn't have specific money coming from the banks for the implementation of the pilot versions, but we built the pipeline, and we also did some sessions where we had like local government discussing with the local banks to understand better what are the different funding lines that the banks are offering to the local government. We had, for example, the case of BDMG, that is the Development Bank of Minas Gerais here in Brazil, that we could arrange some meetings between BDMG and the cities. And BDMG already actually had a very specific line of funding for local governments that the cities didn't know about. So it was very important for us to have that moment, so that BDMG could come and then discuss with the bank about all the different lines of funding that they have for local government. And for us, it was also very important because we had a showcase, and we had also more information from an actual local bank that was interested in funding the projects, that we could actually include in the guides that we provided to the city by the end of this first phase of the project.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Sorry, Sebastian, were you saying something?
Only thank you. That's interesting. Thank you, Amin.
Great. Thank you as well from my side. I see there is a raised hand from Kai Lipsius from Essen. However, with the eye to the time, I would ask you, Kai, sorry, to maybe note down your question and park it for later. I would really like to come to the next example now, where also we see different stakeholders collaborating to fund the project for Healthy Streets. And we will hear all about it from Lucy Saunders, the director from Healthy Streets. So Lucy, really great to have you today, and the word is to you.
Thank you. I'll just start sharing my screen with you. And in this presentation, you will hear some similar themes to what you heard from the key lessons from Armel as well.
Perfect. So can you see it perfectly?
Yeah. Okay, good.
Wonderful, please.
So I'm going to be talking about that cross-sectoral financing with health. And I'm going to be talking about a project that is still very fresh and live, happening now in London, delivering Healthy Streets. And you'll learn a bit more about what Healthy Streets is during this next few minutes. So a little overview of the project, first of all, and then I'm going to talk more about how this kind of thing comes about. The context was the beginning of the pandemic. So looking at spring and early summer of last year, there was a huge focus on many people staying close to home. The only time they were leaving their home was to walk or cycle for essential journeys or exercise, and concern that they didn't have a good local environment in which to walk and cycle, particularly children. And there was also a worrying increase in car use as public transport use was reducing. Across the city, people were asking for changes to their local streets to reduce the dominance of traffic. Those voices tended to be more from more affluent and higher social groups. And so there was a concern that maybe those people who lived in less affluent areas were going to be forgotten about with the development of new measures. So there's a health charity called Impact on Urban Health, who works specifically in one inner London borough in, it's called Southwark. And they wanted to support a focus on some local measures to improve streets for local people walking and cycling. In neighbourhoods with very poor air quality, high levels of child obesity, high levels of social housing, where there are schools and communities trying to access those schools, as well as local parks and local facilities. And they wanted to make sure that this project was really well evaluated. And this is something that you find when you work with public health organisations. They have very high standards for evaluation, for demonstrating the impact of projects. And they said, we want to invest in these project areas, but we are only doing it on the condition that the project is well evaluated, so we can learn from it to see whether it should be replicated. So the governance for this project was the Impact on Urban Health invested around 290,000 euros, so 250,000 British pounds, in 3 project areas, plus the cost of the evaluation. Everything was included in this amount. And they gave this to the local council, the local authority, to deliver the project, but on some conditions. So while the transport team in the local authority delivered the project, they had to do so under the guidance of me at Healthy Streets. I come from a public health background, but I've worked in transport for many years. So I sit on the interface between those two sectors. Plus also, they had recruited a public health specialist into the health team at the council who would sit inside the organisation and help that internal coordination. So there were kind of 4 different prongs to the governance of this project that made it more effective, but also more complex. The timeline for the project was that we started planning in May and June of last year. We started implementing in January of this year, and the project is still in place. In November, the politicians will decide whether this temporary project will be made a permanent change, whether it will be amended, or whether it will be removed. And part of what will influence their decision will be the data that we have been collecting, but also, very importantly, the views of local people who have been consulted on how they are experiencing these changes and whether they want them to stay or change or be removed. To choose our project locations, we looked at areas of greatest need from a public health perspective on those issues I've described already: child obesity, low income, high social housing, poor air quality. We were also focusing on areas that didn't have other changes planned, because a lot of change happens in a global city. So you have to find the areas where other changes aren't happening. And we also needed the support of the local politicians. So there were some practical elements. And key to this is when you have a very small budget to spend on delivering some changes, you have to make sure that you can actually have a significant impact with the money that you have. So we had to consider this as well. It might not seem like a small amount of money to you, but when it comes to changing streets, it's very, very expensive. So the budget costs are high, even for temporary changes. As I said, Impact on Urban Health are very much focused on making sure that we learn from experience and we build on our evidence base. These kinds of changes are generally not very robustly evaluated, and they were keen that we use this Healthy Streets evaluation framework to set a high standard for the evaluation. You can read more about this. It's available to download from the Healthy Streets resources page. There are 3 elements to the evaluation: measuring how the street has become a healthier environment, measuring what people think of the street, and measuring how people are using it. So are they walking, cycling, and spending time more or less in the street as a result of the changes? So these were the 3 elements that we used in the evaluation. And for measuring whether the street has become a healthier environment, we use this tool called the Healthy Streets Design Check, which again can be downloaded from the Healthy Streets resources page. And this is a quantified tool for measuring the 10 healthy streets indicators, which I will tell you about in a moment. They do come from a health basis, but they're also very much related to environmental sustainability and social equity. The results from these kinds of street measurements are produced in this quantified way that makes it simple for people to understand the scale of the impact that a change has had, so that people can assess for themselves whether they feel it has been worthwhile. Let me show you some of the changes that we made. It was a menu of different kinds of changes, and each local area is slightly different with different kinds of needs. So what we did was we looked at the local streets, we walked around, we spent time on them, and we identified what were the key things that needed to be changed to make the environment easier for people to walk and cycle and spend time in. And then we developed our set of interventions. The one that requires the greatest amount of political boldness, but the one which has the biggest impact for the lowest investment, is a traffic filter. This is an example of one of the streets in one of our project areas before the changes were made. And as you can see, there's a lot of traffic moving through these local residential streets. A lot of this is people who are trying to avoid traffic jams on main roads and trying to find shortcuts. The change that we put in place in this project is these 3 barriers at the end of the street that mean that people can still walk and cycle through this street. For anyone who needs to access the street by car, they can still access it by another route, but you can no longer drive through the neighbourhood as a shortcut. So this is quite a bold measure to take, but it has a very big impact. We made some very small changes as well. So this is one of the streets that has a large secondary school on it. So many young people walk along this street every day, and there's obviously a major flaw in the footpath because anyone who needs step-free access at this entrance, they have a problem. So we fixed problems like this around the school neighbourhoods, and these types of things are actually permanent, but they're small improvements that make a big difference to some people. And here's another street on the approach to a school. The school is actually where the left turn is here. So you can see that the footpath becomes very narrow, and the traffic that's turning left, it moves very fast, which can mean that it's both dangerous for people walking and for people cycling. So to address the issue that we have with this left turn here, we actually widened the footpath and introduced some cycle parking, and that meant that people now drive much more calmly along this street and they turn the corner much more cautiously. So it increases the space for people walking and it makes it safer for everyone. This type of measure, it seems small. This was one of the most expensive things that we invested in, but we felt that it was worth it for the benefit to those young people going to school. And we tried as much as possible to combine these measures together so that we had places where there were both the filters and some step-free access introduced, so permanent changes to improve the environment, and also some seating and planting to make it more attractive.
Lucy, I'm incredibly sorry. I just need to ask you already to speed up a little bit.
Yeah.
So we have
that's fine.
Later to ask.
Of course. So I just want to focus at the end here about how this kind of thing comes about. It doesn't happen by chance. In London, this has been built on for about a decade of working to embed health in transport policy. So this is the Mayor of London. He's very much committed to improving public health, and this is now the framework for his transport strategy. It's also embedded in all his other strategies as well. And this is what this framework is, these 10 indicators that describe how a street looks and feels for people. So it picks out the key health issues, but also talks about accessibility and sustainable travel, and making sure that street environments are pleasant, ambient places for people to spend time. The key message from our experience of working over many years in London on embedding health in transport policy is that this is what is needed to end up with this cross-sector financing with health. For really successful projects to work well, there needs to be many years of capacity building with staff, of political will, and also of making sure that the strategies are in place so that it's a sustained change and there's a trusting relationship there. And that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lucy, for this really enlightening presentation, I feel. Thank you also for spending the time that you did for sharing with us what were really the concrete measures that were taken, and also what were the conditions up front in terms of the evaluation. I think that was really valuable to learn. It was a great example on the relationship between traffic and health. This intersection, I think, is really relevant for our discussion. And also from, as you initially also said, I think from your learnings or key messages in the end, we could already see some overlaps with the previous presentation. It's also great to already see that capacity building and political will are really crucial points. May I ask you a similar question that I did with Amel before I open the floor is, could you re-explain, maybe I also missed it concretely, how the funding were put together, like were the different sources for that funding, or was it coming from the foundation? Just to clarify for me.
So all the funding came from the foundation, but on the conditions that we've described.
Okay, thank you so much. Great, then I saw already a raised hand. From Kai, is that the hand from before, or do you have a question to Lucy?
It's a new hand.
Okay,
it's a hand for Lucy. So thank you very much, Lucy. It was very interesting and very helpful for us also in creating or designing a project where we also have these kind of interventions of temporary measures. I was wondering, because you described that the selection of the projects was also done very evidence-based, and I was wondering, whether you would also see a value as a starting point to create these kind of cross-sectoral collaborations, to create some kind of team in order to select these projects, or do you also say that it is also a good tactic to have a lot of bankable projects and then look for financing by showing how these already pre-developed pipeline of project is helping your the common goals, for example, for also creating health issues? Or do you think that also the kind of collaborative exercise of selecting and developing this project is very important in the sense of capacity building and collaboration? Because from the first talk, I was thinking, yeah, well, if you really have a good pipeline of projects and then look for financing, you might find some new sources. But I hear a lot about the value of this collaboration experience.
Yes, I think it can be, because this is affecting people's local neighborhoods, it's important that people feel they have some say in whether it happens in their neighborhood from the beginning. And so if you were to, for example, have a list of places you were planning to work, and the public didn't feel that they had been involved in that, it could get quite difficult. So it's probably good to be sensitive about how it's going to be received by the public if you've got a list. But I should say that the situation in London is because of this framework and this strategy that has been in place for years of taking the healthy streets approach, that all of the local authorities are always thinking, where could we be working next? So they will have in their mind a long list of all the places where there's potential, and they will be drawing on that knowledge when they are then talking to the public about whether the public want the change in their area, and when they're looking at what is practical. So that early stage of scoping out neighbourhoods, we were looking at where people said they wanted the change, but also we had this wasn't the first time we'd thought about this. This is something that the officers in the council are thinking about all the time. Where could we work? What could we do? If we had the resources, what could we change?
Thank you so much, Lucy. And again, with an eye to the time, I invite everybody to keep further questions and also inputs to the discussion we have at the end. And I'm now very happy to hand over to my colleague Purya on the question of crowdsourcing solutions, and he will introduce to us what he has to offer on that front. Purya, we're very happy to have you, and the floor is yours.
Much appreciated, Rebecca, and thanks for the invitation, and thanks for having me, and hello to everyone. It's a great pleasure to be with all of you here. I am Purya, and while the host is getting me the permission to share my screen, I would like to quickly tell you that I'm the Senior Research Officer with ICLEI World Secretariat, and I'm the Coordinator of ICLEI's Global Research and Innovation Strategy across ICLEI offices. I'm one of the founding members of Research and Innovation Technical Working Group in GCOM. I was still trying to share my screen, but it says host disabled participants screen sharing. So I guess perhaps you can make me a co-host. Awesome, thank you so much. Thanks so much to the previous colleagues who teed up the conversation for us. It was very interesting to hear from them their experience and perspective. And now I would like to talk about crowdfunding and crowd financing solutions to support long-term funding for sustainability projects at the community level. But first and foremost, I would like to quickly start with a quick definition of the concept. So while digitalization is the shift from paper to digital format and the shift from manual to automated process, digitalization is the integration of digital technologies in our everyday life, changing the way that we interact and live. So we know that digitalization and digital innovation have the potential to transform the current landscape of sustainability and climate action, and are increasingly considered as key enablers for attaining sustainability goals. Nowadays, more and more scholars believe that in order to leverage this potential to support responses to climate change and sustainable development challenges, digitalization and sustainability should work hand in hand. So digital innovation has been successfully used in the private sector in areas such as banking, insurance, entertainment industry, and other areas to change the landscape and provide new offerings which were not possible in the past, or only possible at high cost, or they were too time consuming. Just a very tangible example, I guess, for all of us is just the Netflix of how changed the landscape of entertainment industry. So observing this potential, more recently, national and subnational governments and relevant stakeholders are trying to harness this wave and find ways to leverage cutting-edge digital technologies to develop and create innovative and unconventional sort of solutions to tackle persistent and emerging climate and sustainability challenges in different levels, across different sectors, and across different thematic areas. So let's think about the bigger picture for a moment. As the world continues to change at an accelerating rate and becomes increasingly complex, conventional solutions and practices are falling short. From the COVID-19 pandemic to social justice issues to our climate emergency, and also challenges and issues linked to our natural resources, leaders are being forced to respond to the growing impacts of widening range of conditions. As a result, leaders, particularly at the subnational and local level, are finding it challenging to match past performances results while adapting to accelerating changes and recognizing that the existing capabilities, tools, and approaches may no longer be sufficient, right? So that's exactly why thinking outside of the box and moving towards new solution is no longer a choice, but a necessity. And that's where digitalization and digital innovation come into play. So talking about, examples of what digital innovation bring to the table, like just take the example of data precision, the increase in data facilitated by digitalization, the precision of data is being increased as well. And also another angle is, as an example, the behavior change of the citizens. And we will get back to this behavior change in more details in terms of just connection, not much in more details because you do not have that much time. It is just a 1 hour presentation that I'm trying to, squeeze it in 10 minutes. But then also like a third actually angle that we can look into is the enhancement of citizens and science interface for multiple purposes. And this particularly encourages a disruptive leadership as it takes a bottom-up approach. So I would like to immediately dive into digital financing and digitalization of finance as the new effective ways and approaches to financing sustainability projects. A novel application of digital innovation is happening in the domain of finance. Digitalization of finance comprises the systematic changes to the financial systems aided by digital technology, including changes in business models, products, and services. So digital financing is broadly defined as services delivered through digital processes and infrastructures. Emerging alternative funding mechanisms can help finance more sustainability projects. So they offer a historic opportunity to overcome shortfalls, gaps, and weaknesses in aligning a new generation of financing instruments, markets, and institutional arrangements with sustainability goals and targets and our shared objectives. So digital financing in general help mobilize financial resources, which are key for mobilizing other types of resources towards building more resilient and sustainable communities. So when thinking about ways of financing sustainability projects and actions, we usually are sort of inclined and tend to think of public money, multilateral banks, and private sector money. But what happens to people's money? What happens to citizens' savings? There is an answer for that. A bold move that shows the global attention to utilizing digital financing to support sustainability is the establishment of the UN Digital Task Force. It was set up just last year in August as part of the roadmap for financing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And its mandate is to catalyze and recommend ways to harness digital financing to accelerate the financing of sustainable development goals, sustainability, and climate actions at the local level. So the task force has focused on how digitalization in general can support the development of citizen-centric financial system that supports people's priorities collectively. So last year, the task force published a report called People's Money that I definitely encourage you to take a look at that. But then linked to this, I would like to invite you quickly to watch a short video that our colleagues at the UN Digital Task Force created.
We are at a fundamental crossroads. Digitalization can advance us more rapidly in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, or it can deepen exclusion, divide us further, increase inequality. The choice is ours. For the first time, digital technology can put economic power into the hands of people, the people that own today's global financial resources. What if every citizen was empowered to make financial choices that support the SDGs and was able to ensure that every last dollar was spent on what really matters to them, family, community, their country, and the planet? Let's put citizens in the driving seat by enabling them to use their savings to finance their long-term development. Increasingly, mobile platforms and data analytics are bringing sophisticated financial services to mass markets. Governments are digitalizing public finance, whilst a third of US public equity trades are now being carried out by computer-managed funds.
Digital technologies, which are revolutionizing financial markets, can be a game changer in reaching our shared objective.
We are the
So digital technologies, which are revolutionizing financial markets, can be a game changer in reaching our shared objectives, as said by the UN Secretary General. So citizens are the ultimate owners of the world's income and wealth. Tens of billions of decisions every day determine what and how we produce and consume today and into the future. In principle, citizens' $130 billion in daily purchases should reflect their informed choices. So citizens are part of a wider macro systems, so their choices affect the changes across the globe. So on the other hand, shifting local government's role from service provider to community enabler is necessary to be able to cope with the increasing complexity that we touched upon earlier. So this can therefore bring us to the point that when it comes to financing sustainability projects and climate mitigation and adaptation projects at the local level, local governments need to look into innovative solutions, particularly those that give the center stage to citizens. In line with this thinking, local governments are and can be enablers for taking citizen fintech initiatives such as digital technology-based crowdfundings and crowdfunding platforms to the required scale, and can help communities move towards becoming more resilient and sustainable. So digital financing can be deployed to create a win-win scenario for citizens and governments, because digital finance unlocks new sources of financing, such as engaging more citizens in crowdfunding and trade, and also citizens can more actively participate and have a say, as my colleague in the previous presentation mentioned, that they feel that they have a say. So currently, digital financing to mobilize citizen savings to invest in projects is considered extremely cutting edge and new, but it's becoming a key part of future landscape in finance arena. So I would like to quickly walk you through a few examples of crowdfunding for sustainability and climate initiatives. So digital financing based on fintech and blockchain is already applied to support sustainability and climate actions and projects. Crowdfunding and blockchain tokens have been used to finance various projects, including cross-sectoral initiatives in the context of climate adaptation and mitigation. As reported by OECD, digital financing based on fintech and blockchain technology, in particular crowdfunding that you're talking about, has emerged as an important source of funding for a sustainability project. Fintech-based finance efforts have already been applied in various countries, such as the case of Barnson in the United States, Colorado in the United States, Buta Vindi in Western Australia, Arubat in Nepal, and also Ngomai in Tanzania, and Tuabo in Philippines. I really would love to have more time to go through all of these examples, but just as a as a taste in your mouth, you see that it is not only the case in global north, but also in global south. These tools are coming handy and becoming deployed more and more frequently. Just one example of citizen fintech initiative is West Berkshire's plan to go carbon neutral by 2030. West Berkshire Council in the UK, like 2/3 of UK councils, have declared a climate emergency and set ambitious net zero targets for their regions. This will require billions of low carbon investment over the coming decade. However, councils will struggle to meet net zero targets whilst maintaining frontline services without new sources of borrowing, non-repayable capital, and the active participation of residents. So therefore, they are using community municipal investments and this CMIs that are green bonds issued by a council corporate body and administrated by a regulated digital crowdfunding platform. So local residents and general public investors purchase the bonds, basically directing investor capital immediately and with high visibility toward the delivery of net zero infrastructure projects. So working with the platform, community municipal investments also open a new communication channel between the council and residents about the urgency of the climate emergency and council's role in delivering net zero projects. So this project was launched in summer 2020 and met its £1 million target ahead of the close date, which suggests community municipal investments, when they are coupled with crowdfunding and digital crowdfunding platforms, are a simple and low-risk mechanism for diversifying borrowing sources. So all in all, we already know that crowdfunding and crowdsourcing leads to increased engagement of citizens and can generate constituent excitement as they engage, as citizens engage directly with public policy issues and are empowered to take an active role in solving, sustainability and climate issues in their jurisdiction. So the connection of community engagement and this crowdfunding is basically, very clear. When local governments look into co-identifying challenges in the context of adaptation, climate adaptation and mitigation with their citizens, followed by co-defining strategies and ultimately co-developing projects with their citizens, then they can better ensure citizens' buy-in for the projects, as it creates a sense of ownership for the projects and actions for citizens. And therefore, local governments can leverage that momentum along with the opportunity of digital finance tools to mobilize their citizen savings to invest in and financing long-term adaptation and mitigation projects. So I would love to put a pause here and thank you so much for bearing me for 14 minutes. And I'm happy to take any question if you wish. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Puya, also for rushing through your presentation and sticking with the time. It was really, great, and it was really interesting from you to, in addition to the first two presentations, to see a different financing stream to learn about crowdfunding, and we have definitely understood why this is an interesting way forward and why in this day's time it's really something to look into and consider. I would like to give now the floor back to Sebastian to either come back to you with a question or actually going now into a broader discussion, since now we have heard three different aspects or different examples to support today's topic. So Sebastian, is there anything now that we heard these different presentations, is there anything that you would like to ask at this point, or should we move on to the broader discussion?
I have some very short questions. Maybe they can also be included in other questions or answers. First, thank you so much for this great, inspiring inputs. And the example from UK was also one which inspired me to work on this topic at the beginning. I just found an article about this health funding project in London some time ago in the internet, I think at Bloomberg's. So Lucy, only maybe it's quite interesting. This foundation is somehow motivated to invest in healthy streets. And how is it related to private sector? Is it a private sector driven foundation, or is it completely independent? And because if you invest in health, this sector will also benefit from a better health of people. So there is less costs and insurance and for the people and in different other money flow sectors. Is it explainable, or is it just an idea of this fund to invest in this projects at basic idea of that funding, or is it also linked with private sectors? And for the digital tools, is there is always this keyword of blockchain in all these projects. Is it possible to use blockchain also to interlink money flows from different institutions, or is it already used? Do you know an example which is maybe trying this already? Because it's always lightening up in discussions, but I never really got into it. Because crowdfunding is really interesting, because you said ownership and people get involved in the project, but there is only then the money involved from this people do the crowdfunding. But if we invest in sustainable solutions, there are so many benefits in other sectors. Can we link that with digital tools? That's from my side.
Thank you, Sebastian.
Thank you.
As I also received a question to Puya in the chat, I would maybe suggest that we move to Puya first. So Puya, now you have Sebastian's question, and I'm reading the second one to you as well. It's a question from Julia Skodra from, I believe, the Essen Health Clinic. Would it be possible to involve equally all citizens in digital financing, irrespectively of their age, education, or other socioeconomic factors? Would that influence inequalities in the city? So first the blockchain question from Sebastian, and then the question how much digital financing is actually possibly contributing to social inequality.
Thank you so much, Sebastian and Rebecca, and also Julieta for the question. So I really would love to have a 2 hours dedicated session about it to really explain the offerings of blockchain technology in general, and is not limited to finance, because like nowadays it is being deployed for tokenizing governance as an example in multiple areas. And then just like this flow of funding is only one of the new and innovative approaches to that. But then like talking about like, you know, inequalities. So here's the thing. Utilization of such approach is very much context-based, right? So before taking any initiative, there's no blueprint for everyone. When designing regulations and basically the roadmap of how to do, local leadership teams and those responsible for local legislation can put together a type of legislation that not only exacerbates the existing inequalities at the local level, but actually addresses them. Let me give you an example. We already know that in some cities, in most cities across the globe, if not all the cities, there are inequalities, and how to address that. Perhaps local governments can think of defining and designing approaches, even when it comes to crowdfunding, to give advantage to the marginalized group over the other ones. Just look into the example of South Africa. When they want to fund some of their projects, they give priority to the previously disadvantaged university, previously disadvantaged groups, right? So just like take this example that is happening and now couple it with this new technological approaches. So I believe whether or not it exacerbates or lessens the inequalities at the local level, it depends on how we design it for that particular context. So context specific is the key that we need to talk about that. So just like, because of, you know, being mindful of time, I quickly provide a quick response for Sebastian as well. Sebastian, if I got your question correctly, you were asking us, okay, that can mobilize citizens, you know, investment. What about the other institutions, funding and financing? The answer is yes. You know, it's just a platform. It's just a way to sort of mobilize investment. But this cannot be necessarily limited to citizens, but also initiatives. I would like to encourage you to look into Miami Coin Initiative for the city of Miami that is actually already ongoing and generating $2,000 every 10 minutes for the city of Miami. So if you look into this initiative, which our colleague from the city of Miami will actually next week present their initiative in our Daring City session about digitalization, which I encourage you to join us and listen to, you will see that how they have opened the space to not only the citizens, but also the other institutions, both private and public, to chip in.
Thank you so much, Puya. I see Sebastian gave a thumbs up, so I think his question would be answered. So maybe I give the floor to Lucy to answer Sebastian's question. Maybe Sebastian, you could in very brief remind us of your question.
I will try if I understood my own question by myself.
If you like to save time, I can describe what the question was in my answer. Would that help? And then you can tell me, Sebastian, if I understood you correctly. So the question was, what is this organization that has paid for this? And the organization is a health organization. So they're a healthcare provider, but they have a charitable arm to them, a charitable foundation. And the commitment of that charitable arm of that healthcare organization is to particularly focus on reducing health inequalities in the area around that hospital. So the area that is served, the local community that is served. And in that area, there are some key health issues that were relevant to this project. There's high levels of poor air quality and there's high levels of child obesity. So they have a particular focus on projects that will help them to address these issues, amongst some others. And they do a range of different works that they deliver themselves or that they fund others to do to focus on these particular priorities that they have. I just wanted to briefly pick up on the bullet points on your slide. Just the first two I wanted to mention is in terms of making this connection successful, it's really important for this cross-sector financing in a democratic system that the general public can understand what's in it for them. So often we talk as policymakers between different departments and we forget that the public will see this information and it needs to make sense to them too. So in London, the Healthy Streets framing is deliberately written so that the general public can understand it, as well as each of the different departments who need to help to deliver it. And the second bullet point, which is asking about what framework you should be using or what strategy, it's really important that when you're asking another sector to invest in your sector, that they can see the benefit to them. Often we think, well, it will be obvious to them, but you have to put quite a lot of work in to help other sectors to see how they're going to benefit from it. So those were just 2 points I wanted to add while I had the floor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lucy, for also bringing this discussion back to the initial questions. And I think this is one of the main components that we're actually trying to achieve, to see how we can actually make the case for this cross-sectoral financing tools. Are there other questions at this point? Please, you can just unmute yourself or raise your hand or type the question in the chat. If there is none at this point, I would maybe like to ask Kai to give us a little bit of an insight on the Trend City project that Sebastian had initially mentioned. Maybe you could also help us to tie this project back to our initial question, how actually this project is trying to leverage finance through this emission trading. That would be really great to hear from you.
Yeah. First of all, so the general idea obviously behind this project is also that different social economically situated districts also usually differ very much in their carbon footprint, and obviously it's also correlated also to generally other aspects of our social economics, with the more wealthy households usually also having a larger footprint. And this is something that we are actually first of all trying really to quantify in 2 different districts in Essen, where we are now making a survey between randomly selected households. Hopefully also we will get enough answers in order to really create some kind of carbon footprint of the whole district. And secondly, in Essen as well as in Germany and on all different kind of governance levels, we all have targets and sometimes also obligations in order to decrease our carbon emissions. And as Sebastian also explained, one of the tools in order to reach these goals is more widespread also to put a price to our carbon emissions. And with this logic, we also hope that we can convince all kinds of different people that it is worthwhile and that they also think of their personal footprints as and put targets, let's say, to their personal footprints. And we are have not yet the final design of a actual emission trading system that would be put into place. But the general logic would probably follow more or less also the one of the emission trading system of the European Union, more also in the beginning stages where we have a kind of where we give people, let's say, the rights to emit for free, and then set a cap and trade system. And so that one of our problems obviously is if we say like we then find out that we have very different levels of carbon footprints, then those with the bigger footprints would kind of need to buy additional certificates, and obviously it's very hard to convince them to get into these kind of schemes voluntarily. So the general idea is then rather with this cap and trade idea that they also kind of can start from their high level of today, but have a goal which obviously is, for example, in line with the overall city goal, let's say carbon neutrality by 2040 and in a linear decreasing line. And so that they can also profit if they are actually able to reduce their personal trading system. Or also that maybe they have some habits that they are really not willing to change, but generally obviously see this value of climate mitigation, and then they are willing then to reach this target more as on the neighborhood level, which is then also being surveyed. So it is really more or less a social experiment also to make all these kinds of statistics very transparent and kind of confront people with this facts and put this into comparison with targets that more or less on a societal level we all agree upon, and then to also discuss with different stakeholders what the possible learning effects about this will be. Obviously we then hope that we will find then that this helps us to raise money for projects that we can also then put into place in the public area of the two districts. So there's all kinds of different possible motivations. We had a discussion, for example, in one of the districts where one of the participants stated that he just changed his car to electromobility, and of course he applied for funding and received the funding of 9,000 euro, but he admitted that it was not necessary for him. So it was not really what made him decide to change to electromobility. And with this kind of logic to say like, so that he's actually then can possibly be rewarded in the sense of also not kind of donating this this funding which he himself is not using, and putting this also into this common goal of reducing the CO2 emissions. Yeah, so it's kind of complicated to explain also without the help of some graphs and thinking, but generally really it's about creating an arena for discussing the different possibilities to mitigate your emissions, depending obviously on your personal welfare, but also on the infrastructure, etc., provided in your neighborhood. And obviously, for example, being a tenant or being a landlord, etc., these kind of aspects, and then raising the awareness that this that it is actually very worthwhile to prepare yourself for regimes where you then will have to pay for your carbon footprint anyways. So it's also about rather being to act actively instead of then being locked into high carbon footprints, and then not being able to make the investments because you already have to pay so much for the consumption. So this is a general idea behind it, and obviously we also see, for example, that we can motivate local companies who just want to make a reporting where they also compensate for their carbon footprint, so that money comes into this local trading scheme also from outside of these neighborhoods. If there's also obviously we can somehow with this trading system prove that there is some kind of a mitigation action due to the input into this trading scheme.
Thank you, Kai. Sorry, I also have to cut you short at this point a little bit, since we're already going over time. Thank you for trying to explain to us what the different aspects of the project are, and we see I think different angles that we have discussed before. So you have the education, capacity building, awareness raising part. We have the CO2 pricing awareness. We have financial contributions potentially coming out of that project. So yeah, and we have, of course, the digital aspect. So I think would be really interesting to follow the learnings that you have talked about. Yeah, with an eye to the time at this point, I would like to wrap up today's webinar. I think what we have seen from the discussions and the different presentations is not.
Dein Mikrofon ist ausgegangen, Rebecca.
Sorry, am I back? Yeah, thanks. So what I wanted to say is that maybe the main outcomes were not so much concrete financing instruments. We have heard about a few, but I think for me the main outcomes is more the learnings that we all shared, how to set up actually these projects with very clear targets, clear indicators, like we have heard from the first two presentations. A good strategy to also map the local stakeholder landscape, and then moving into the steps also with political commitment behind. So to have not only the project strategy, but also to have the buy-in and have like the bigger picture. I think that's something that all of the projects had in common. And then it would be actually the background would be set to look into concrete projects, communicate what would be the benefits on different levels across the sectors. And with that setting, I think the next step to leverage or to accumulate financing for the projects is then easier possible. So I think, yeah, more the setting of the scene and the strategy is what I take out of this conversation. Maybe I give the last word to Sebastian towards the content of the session before I then, yeah, come back with a goodbye and one or two announcements.
Yeah, thank you for wrapping up, Rebecca. So I think it's very important to discuss this topic further and to just raise awareness and responsibility for everybody who is taking action and influencing public space and public health and the quality of life. So I think that the ownership of any real estate has having such a great impact, or an ownership of a car or the usage of a car has having an impact on other people, and their influencing their life and their what they pay for in their life, even if they don't notice in the first view. So I think this Trans-City project will bring a very interesting view on how people behave and what their footprint is, and what this also is translated in money. Money is always very unemotional, but it also offers us a comparable accounting system. So if people have a bigger car and drive to the bio market, they feel well because it's an electric car maybe, but also they will have some bigger footprint than a guy from a poorer neighborhood who is having no car because he has no money to pay for it. And having that in mind will bring us, I think, a step further. And if we can also involve stakeholders, like from the examples we had here today, which I think they will bring us a step further. And I really want to come back to some of the participants here in detail. I think we can bring this puzzle parts together. So I really hope to have some more really usable tools in the end. It won't be, I think it will be more like a example project, which we can maybe set up with including 2 or 3 different or 4 stakeholders engaging in that. But I really think that we can make the step away from this traditional funding idea, more to really involve money flows in financing sustainable neighborhood projects and CO2 reducing and climate mitigation measures. So I'm looking forward for that, and thank you to everybody, and especially to you, Rebecca and Ying, for organizing all that UTA program and these challenges. And I really am inspired from today. I get lots of things to wrap up and think about.
Thank you so much, Sebastian, and hopefully we can collectively complete the puzzle, or start completing the puzzle, putting the pieces together. And what I really like is that in all our conversations, actually the social equity aspect that is also guiding us through UTA exchanges is always coming up. So we will also see how we can, strengthen this approach or the learnings on the social equity front. So for me now, I would like to say thank you to all participants of today, specifically, of course, to our speakers, and to Sebastian and Kai from the city of Essen, who are also helping us to understand where we are. I wanted to announce an upcoming ICLE event, so maybe you could go back one slide. We have a conference coming up from ICLE, it's the Daring Cities 2021 edition, the Global Virtual Forum for Urban Leaders taking on the climate emergency. So we can continue some of the aspects of this climate mitigation work that came up today in that conference. Also, Puya had already mentioned that he will also be part of the conversation there. So you see the link there. If you're interested, you can take a look at the program and you're invited to join. With that, I apologize for being quite over time, but yeah, I think I wanted to give the questions also the room they deserve. So with that, I wish you all a great rest of your day, and a big thank you to everybody again. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. See you next time.